This is Between Realms and Reason, bridging the inner and outer cosmos, one conversation at a time. Here's your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. What if the afterlife wasn't a vague concept, but a very real and reachable realm? Suzanne Giesemann is an internationally respected spiritual teacher and an evidential medium with more than 15 books, 6 best-selling hemisync recordings, a thriving podcast, and YouTube videos reaching millions of viewers. Her journey from hard as nails Navy commander and aide to the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs to the Watkins list of the 100 most influential spiritually influential living people on the planet today has been nothing less than extraordinary. Suzanne Giesemann joins me today to tell us about her latest book, Making the Afterlife Connection, the journey from doubt to knowing that death is not the end, in which she boldly avows, I guarantee you that your beloved children and anyone who dies are not dead and gone. So whether you're curious, skeptical, or quietly hopeful, stay tuned. This is a conversation that might just change the way you see everything. Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you, Sandy. It's a joy to be with you again.
You too. So you had a really prestigious military career, and I'm sure you're really tired of having to go over this one over and over again. But just briefly, for those who haven't heard it, just give a little, overview of what triggered that segue in your life.
I'm not tired of sharing it at all, Sandy, because I just received yet another email yesterday from someone who now follows my work, and they said that it's my background that allowed them to believe what their soul already knows is true. So I honor that background. Definitely serving at the highest levels of the U.S. military was an incredible honor, but I never expected the honor of now serving spirit and those who have loved ones across the veil and helping people realize that we're souls now. Unfortunately, that came from a great deal of pain for our family when my stepdaughter, who was also in the military, a sergeant in the Marine Corps, was struck and killed by lightning. That was 19 years ago, and my life is drastically different now. I never foresaw that I would have a career in a spiritual field. I was raised with no religion, but I didn't deny looking at Susan's body at her funeral that this thing we call a soul is real because it was missing from that body. And I went in search of it and found so much more that I got goosebumps. I now find it that great honor to help other people find.
I find more and more people who have, completely different kinds of careers, and highly prestigious ones, and often in science or something, like the industry you were in, they are having similar experiences. And I do believe that this is because we need people like you, credentialed people, for us to begin to believe it, because, you're not going to make this up.
And you don't need to. Once you tap into the greater reality, it's buckle your seatbelt time, because the evidence that they'll share with us, the synchronicities that they in the higher realms allow us to experience when we're open to it, just are convincing through the personal experience. That's what I want everybody to have. Not just listen to my stories, but have that experience of interacting with higher consciousness.
Yeah, and you have said often that grief can become a gateway. Do you feel that your grief over losing your stepdaughter was, partly what opened that door? I mean, aside from seeing, there was no soul.
Absolutely, because that grief is so, I want to use the word awful, but there's a better word. Well, it's transformational because it's so dissonant with what we're used to in our normal lives. It's so uncomfortable. It causes us to seek relief. And in the seeking, we find insights and a new way of life that we couldn't even imagine. So it takes what I call a wake-up call in many cases, especially for people that you were talking about who are very left brain.
Do you look back now and see, as painful And as devastating as it was that your stepdaughter gave you a great gift.
Oh, there's no doubt, especially because I know she's right here. All our loved ones are just on a different channel, a different frequency, but it was an immense gift that keeps on giving. Like you said, it blows me away that my YouTube videos have had over 14 million views. My goal when I discovered there's a greater reality was help me share the messages of hope with millions. That was an outrageous claim at the time, Sandie, but I truly believed that if we believe, working with spirit, we can manifest goals that serve the greater good, and that's what's happening.
So let's talk about the science of the spirit world. You know, as someone who trained in a very logical, protocol-driven world, how did you come to trust your experiences? You know,
I love that you used the word protocol. Nobody ever has, but that was one of my specialties in the military. I was the protocol officer to the head of the U.S. Navy, and it is all about rules and regulations and following the book. And how did I translate that? Was that the question?
yeah. Well, how did you learn to trust those experiences with that background?
That word right there is the biggest challenge for people that go down the path of transdimensional communication like I have. And the trust comes from the evidence that those across the veil will give us if we ask for it, if we require it. And I know that those in spirit know they better give me really good evidence when they connect with me, or I'm not going to do this work. I don't want what we call jokingly airy-fairy messages. You know, oh, it's very nice over here. Oh, that's lovely, but back it up with some facts. So you ask for it and spirit delivers. And then when you keep getting what I call gold nuggets of evidence, every time we connect with spirit, you learn to trust these sometimes outrageous things that we hear. They might seem funny, but they're some of the best memories somebody brought through from across the veil, and we say it, and the loved one bursts into tears because they say, oh my God, that's my loved one. That's them. Nobody else could have known that. So it's the repetitive practice of connecting and trusting that builds the trust.
Do you ever meet any of your former colleagues or those chiefs of staff? You know, I wonder what they have to say about what you're doing now.
I don't regularly, but there are a handful of them. One is one of my dearest friends. She worked with me in the Pentagon in my final assignment, and she's totally on board. One was also in that final assignment. He's in the documentary Messages of Hope that people can find on Amazon.com. He willingly came back to recreate the scene where I shared with him what I'm doing now. And he's now a busy businessman, a mover and a shaker. And when I told him I was talking to people who have crossed the veil, he looked shocked. He set his phone down, turned it off, and started to pay attention because he said if it was anybody else but me, he would have been asking for the check. We were in a restaurant. But he knows me and he knows my integrity, and I'm very proud of that. I'm grateful for that it allows people to believe. They're the one person who just didn't want to have anything to do, didn't want to hear about my work, is the 4-star general for whom I was the aide, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I can see where he was coming from. I mean, when you get that high in the military, you worry about your reputation, you worry about what people will think. And he was raised in what we call the Bible Belt in the United States. And I know what religion he was, and I know that they're not fond of spirit communication. So I honor his path, but it was like David and Goliath. I stood up to him with confidence and from the heart, without defensiveness, and I said, are you saying that I am a fraud? And he looked shocked and he said, no, I'm not saying that at all. And I said, then I can tell you that the work I do is changing lives and healing lives. And it's okay if you don't believe, but please don't accuse me of doing something wrong. It was a moment, let me tell you.
If ever he looks at your YouTube views, that must give him food for thought.
I doubt he looks, but it would.
It would, yeah. So what is the most compelling evidence or validation that you've personally received?
Oh, wow. That would be the story of a young man named Wolf, whose death left proof that we are souls. In fact, I'm in my RV now taking Wolf's Message, the new documentary, on tour around the United States because it is so profound. He left proof for all of us, not through a medium, but in the way he set up his home to show that he knew he was going to be struck and killed by lightning, just like my stepdaughter. And he left signs around his apartment, which he left in pristine condition, even though it always looked like it had been struck by a tornado. He left nothing untouched. That he cut out his favorite T-shirt with a lightning bolt on it and tacked it on the wall across from the poem that described how he was going to pass, when, and where. So that was before he passed. Then he honored me by coming through me. 2 days before, I did a reading for his parent in a drop-in with 46 pieces of evidence that were validated by his parents and scored by Dr. Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, an afterlife researcher. And then in the reading that he did, so much evidence that leaves no doubt I was connecting with him, that has not only changed his parents' life, but now countless thousands of people, hopefully millions, now that this video is out, the documentary Wolf's Message.
I was going to talk about that later, but let's continue talking about it now. You feature heavily in that movie, and in fact, one of the reasons you're in that movie, am I not correct in saying that you actually helped previously the director of that movie connect with his son?
That's right. The way that I found the perfect person to bring this story to life in a credible, honorable way, not Hollywood style. There was no need to sensationalize a story that's already beyond sensational. There was no reason to create a good guy and bad guy in a story that has only good guys. And so we didn't want Hollywood. We wanted somebody that understood why we need to bring this message to the world. It will change people's lives. And Jim Spruill is the man that Spirit led me to. Actually, the spirit that led me to Jim is his son, Dakota, across the veil. You want to hear how he did it?
Yes, please.
Jim's wife was searching for information about the afterlife after their son, Dakota, was struck and killed by a car. And she had been looking at books on Amazon, and she noticed there was an item in her cart on Amazon, but she hadn't ordered anything. She clicked the cart, and there was my book still right here about the afterlife. She'd never heard of me. She had never looked at my books, yet there it was in her cart. So all excited because it sounded like exactly what she needed, and it was. She ordered it. I got an email from Jim Spruill, who I'd never met, never heard of, after that book arrived. He was upset, to put it mildly. And now when we screen these documentaries around the country, I read that email to people because it's hilarious, Sandie. He says, "What the hell is going on? My book arrived and we were all excited, and it is printed upside down, backwards, and out of order." Thousands of copies of this book have gone out, and none of them came off the printer that way. There's no other explanation, I call that an NOE, than that his son somehow made that happen. And I can't explain it scientifically, but beyond space and time, Spirit can manipulate this very malleable world. And I reached out to Jim, and I didn't apologize for that book. I had questions. I said, "Was your son a bit of a trickster? Did he like a good joke? Did he see the world differently?" All of the above. I knew that we were being set up by his son, that I was supposed to do a reading for Jim and Gloria, and I did. What a powerful soul. What an evidential reading we had. And so I was going to feature that reading in a keynote speech I was giving at an upcoming conference, right about the time that another psychic told me there was going to be a movie made in the next year. And I realized Jim Spruill is a movie maker. And I saw the web of connections coming together, and it's exactly what has happened. And he, knowing how important this message is, that we don't die, that love is eternal, having been shown that by his very own son, Dakota, Jim has put his heart and soul into this, and you feel it in the movie. It's divine.
Now, there were details and messages that didn't make it into the movie. Do you want to
Sure.
share some of those from Wolf?
But what didn't make it into the movie were so many details that came through in the reading that there just wasn't time for in an hour-long documentary. All the really, really important ones were put in there so people can read the book and just see the rest of the breadcrumbs that led me like a detective to figure out when he dropped in with so much evidence that was validated, when he did a reading that was so clear, why did he bring up some unusual things that his parents couldn't make sense of? Those came to light beautifully without seeking in the ensuing months, and that became the book and that became the movie. So again, the most important details are in the video. The rest are just breadcrumbs.
So this movie, I mean, there are screenings taking place all over the country, and they have been and they will continue to be. But you're also making it available for people to stream as well now, aren't you?
That's right, through wolfsmessage.com as of May 14th, video on demand. And I'm thrilled to report that Gaia TV, the wonderful consciousness raising station, is going to be streaming it. I just signed the contract, and that'll happen sometime around June 2025.
Cool. So you have said that we all share the one mind of spirit. Would you say that this aligns with ideas from quantum physics and consciousness research?
Absolutely. It's just using different languages, and I know you know this yourself. The scientific language would call it the 0 point field, or the one field of consciousness. And it's all about attuning to different frequencies. So it just depends on what language you use, but it's all the same thing. We just have to bypass the filters of our brain, which keep us from noticing energy and information that's right here, right now. And it's a good thing the brain is programmed the way it is. Mike Wolf Passacarnis, Wolf said he was in two worlds at once and it was very busy in his head. He had trouble managing this world. He was even diagnosed as mentally ill. So one of the messages of several in our documentary is that not everything that people label mental illness is actually an illness. It's simply different wiring that causes us to have challenges in this world. But there really aren't two worlds, Sandie. It's one continuum of consciousness. We just delineate between physical and non-physical because that's where the boundaries of our physical senses end. But other creatures have different boundaries. So perception is reality.
Yes, that's very true. You say that anyone can connect with spirit. I mean, what would be the first steps for us to take in order to achieve that?
Yeah, anyone can connect with spirit because we are spirit manifesting in human form. We learn to quiet the left brain, dampen its tendencies to categorize and analyze and rule through meditation or presence practices. And in quieting the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere is activated. When you get into a balanced whole brain state, left and right flowing together, that's how we bypass the filters. We can't do it completely as long as we're in a body, but we can open up more and more to frequencies that are right here. The initial connections we make are through intuition, which most people have been experiencing their whole lives, but aren't really capitalizing on. So we start to know things more. We feel more guided. But the more you activate that right brain in periods of sitting in the silence and blocking out the objective physical world, now you might start noticing things that stand out, such as messages from loved ones or guides, imagery that they are putting into awareness, sensations and feelings, and simply knowing things on a grander scale that you couldn't possibly know. It's really exciting when you start tapping into that.
You know, in light of all the research that's emerging, why do you think that mediumship still carries this kind of, skepticism or fear?
Most likely from history throughout the ages of those who want power and don't want people to realize that you can access information yourself. I think that's the number one thing.
Yeah, there's nothing to be afraid of.
There really isn't. And people say, well, what about evil or dark spirits? Well, this is a world of dark and light. We have a lot of evil people here that we need to be wary of. I would say that love truly does conquer all in the spirit realms. Here in the physical world, it won't stop a bullet, but love will overcome any situation ultimately. So when I sense anything that I feel any fear from in my meditation, I literally send it love. I turn up my light and say, whatever this is, you probably have something to teach me, but I send you so much love. And it just dissolves or shows me what I need to clear out.
I've heard about people's loved ones who've passed over hanging around, and in some cases, almost being attached to them. And that isn't necessarily a good thing. Is this true?
This can definitely happen, but we have certain spiritual laws. One of them, the law of personal responsibility, and you simply state, this is too much, you must back off now, or you must go away, or go to the light. They simply like your energy, and again, the darkness doesn't like the light, or a loved one that is too clingy respects one's boundaries once you establish those.
I think it's very hard for us to think of, someone that we knew as this non-corporeal, bundle of energy that is able to communicate and is able to show you or another medium, some kind of semblance of their former physical self. This is, quite mind-blowing.
Drives me crazy that I have to constantly remind my human self this is real because I don't see them. And there's something about our physical human being that needs that physical proof. I have so much evidence from the afterlife. There is zero doubt in my mind that those who passed are real, still exist, communicate with us in two-way conversations. Yet when I listen to my own videos, I call her my content curator, Christy Majors, takes some of my past classes and teachings and puts them into shorts and shorter videos. And I listen to these stories that I've shared over the years that I've forgotten, and I just say, wow, it's amazing. I never fail to be awed by how the spirit world proves their presence.
You said you don't see them. Do you sense or hear?
Oh,
How does it?
I sense their personalities so clearly I can get down to the little nuances that make one person different from another. That's my anchor. If I don't feel their personality, I won't continue with a connection because the left brain will make up a story, tell a story. Once you learn that as a medium, it really instills in you, if you're ethical, the need and the requirement to have some way to truly anchor in that presence. For me, since I don't see them, and I know that's a gift to me because it has forced me to feel them, just to get to know who they are as still a person through their personality. Then I see charades and I see images. I just can't see their face enough to describe them. And I know they're holding that back because there's no other reason why I wouldn't.
In
It
the
causes
early
me to fine
days,
tune.
in
Yeah.
the earlier days when this was fairly new to you, did you go and get any training in mediumship?
Oh, yes. And in that new book that's out, Making the Afterlife Connection, I tell all about my experiences in England at the Arthur Findlay
After
College.
Finley.
Phenomenal experiences that changed my life because until I went there, I had only felt like I was pulling data out. I wasn't feeling the personality. So I wasn't happy with that. How do I know I'm not making this up? How do I know I'm not reading somebody's mind? So when I went to Arthur Findlay College, which is just a 1-week course, but you learn the skills and the systems, then it's up to putting it into practice. You learn by doing in this field. But I went over there and said, I need to feel you. And I would like to see you. And I did see one of less than a handful of times I saw a spirit objectively. Wispy, but enough to describe the little granny glasses and the bun on the woman's head. like I said, I know that the Spirit's withholding it so I become so fine-tuned in my attunement to them that I can describe their idiosyncrasies and personalities. I tell everybody the test of a good reading is that your client leaves and says, "Oh my God, that was them. That's my loved one." And a personality will do that, even more so than saying, "Oh yeah, they have blonde hair and a big nose and full red lips." That kind of thing is nice, but nothing like capturing someone's essence.
I love that you mentioned Arthur Findlay. It is 10 minutes from where I live.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, when I landed at Stansted Airport and I asked to go to Arthur Findlay College, the cab driver in 2009 didn't know what I was talking about, and I said, "It's the School for Mediums," and he said, "Oh, Spooks College. Sure, I know that." Like Harry Potter, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's world famous. I've spoken to many mediums who've trained there. Yeah.
Well, the reason that mediums who want to be the best go there is because they emphasize evidence.
Yeah.
Balancing that with the beautiful messages from across the veil makes all the difference.
Yeah. So you have described making the afterlife connection as an updated version of your journey. What's changed most since you wrote your memoir?
Besides the absolute trust I have in the spirit world, because Messages of Hope was really my journey of coming to trust. I was such a doubter. So the absolute trust, but also the depth of evidence, the level of connection that I've achieved and am able to demonstrate through that book, the unwavering certainty that we are souls, and my coming to know we are God manifest. I'm going to say it right here out loud. People are afraid to say that, but we are all manifestations of God. And in the past, when I wrote Messages of Hope, I kind of tap danced around that because I was still in that what will people think mode, but I'm not anymore. It will change your life to accept that we're here to be the arms and legs and voice of spirit that is not a being, that doesn't have form, that takes form through us for the joy of experiencing life in human form. And it's not always joyous, as we know, but when you know who you really are, there is an underlying joy that never goes away.
One of the things that, I have a curiosity about is I do believe in reincarnation. We've all lived many times. We've had many personalities. But we tend to show up, to people like you as the most recent. Is that because people need that evidence?
It is. I don't get into past lives in my work. It's only come up. I can't even remember 5 examples of tapping into somebody's past life because we really are here to learn from this life. But some people have tendencies in this life that they just can't explain. And in that case, like I had a woman who had a terrible fear of drowning, and I didn't know that. But I was shown by her guides in a reading that she had drowned in a past life. And she said, "Oh my gosh, that explains why I'm so deathly afraid of water." So in that case, it was helpful and healing. In many cases, it's merely a curiosity for people.
Is it hard to turn it off? I mean, do you find yourself, at a party or something and suddenly there it is and, you'd rather it not in that, situation?
Not for me at all. And I know it's because at a higher level, my higher self and my guides know my personality. I would want to and feel responsible for giving people readings all the time. And I would be on all the time. As it is, I'm working most of the time with writing and preparing for presentations and such. So I don't sense the spirit, which to me has been a major source of frustration. To have somebody come up to me in a book line at a conference and say, "I have my child's across the veil." Wouldn't I love to just say instantly, "Oh, and they're right here and they say this," but I would be doing that. So it's cut off for me. When I get a drop in, like Wolf dropped in on me, or just recently somebody else's child dropped in on me, oh, I love that. I celebrate it. I'm asking for more of that, but without knocking me off balance.
Yeah. Can you share? I mean, you've got updated stories in the new book. I mean, can you share some of those with us? Some of your
I
favorites?
don't want to give away a spoiler alert here. well, it is near the end, but it's just this thorough trust and coming to trust spirit. It wasn't a connection in a reading, it was in my meditation. As I teach anyone who takes my courses, we can tap into anybody who has passed if it serves the greater good. We can tap into higher beings that might never have been in human form. And I share in the book my experience of tapping into a mythological figure, Odin, the All-Father of the Norse gods. And there's phenomenal evidence that he gave when he came through. Most normal people would be embarrassed to say I spoke to a mythological character, but he told me about his flying horse and the fact that he was pierced in the side with a spear, and I literally felt the pain and yelped out loud when he first visited me. I write about that because I looked him up online later, and the myth that describes Odin's life talks about that sword that pierced him, talks about his flying horse. But why did he come? For the teaching. And that's what any connection with higher consciousness will do. And I remember a line I'll never forget. I said to him, "Were you real? Are you real?" And he said, "As real as you are, but not human." And I said, totally confused, "But you're a myth." And he said, "Sandie, you are a myth." What is a myth? You're all about stories, telling stories. A myth is a story. What is our life? It's a story that the soul came here to live. And it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it carries and conveys information, has meaning. We are souls living stories. And then at the end, I won't give it away, he came back in a phenomenal way to teach me about trust and what happens when we don't trust and how we limit ourselves with our own fears and what happens when we own who we are. It's a game changer. It's a life changer. And I'm grateful to Odin and the Great Spirit that I oftentimes call Joy with a capital J for teaching me that lesson in a palpable way that I tell at the end of the book.
That's interesting because I can understand that, because once we move on, our life becomes, as you say, a story, a myth, and it's, yes. And when you think about how Tibetan monks, we hear about how they can create thought form beings, they're not human, but they can take shape if you put enough energy into creating that thought form. I think they call them torpors or something like that. So if that's possible, then why would it not be possible to communicate with the myth?
And as Odin told me, anything that can be created in consciousness is real, because what is real? What we experience. And the collective consciousness has experienced Odin over millennia. He is very real, but not because we created him. We are awareness itself creating all of this. So it's created by awareness just as we are created by awareness. And if it provides healing, comfort, and growth, then it serves a purpose. So I continue these conversations with him, and I definitely learned things that are helpful. If it had been fanciful and just boost my ego, there's no point in that.
It's interesting because I remember talking to a channel and teacher who recently passed. We did an interview several years ago, and he was saying that when he writes, he will tap into the energy of John Lennon or somebody, who has the kinds of wisdom that are going to help support what it is that he wants to convey. The idea of being able to tap into someone like John Lennon and say, "Hey, help me out here," is rather compelling.
I tell in the book, Making the Afterlife Connection, about connecting with Albert Einstein. I can't remember if it's in that book, but I wanted to experiment, and I encourage my students and everybody listening to do the same, to ask for a certain public figure or famous person to come to you in meditation if they have something that will be of service. So I had been reading Albert Einstein and so many books about quantum physics. He keeps popping up, and spiritual quotes, because he was quite a spiritual man. So I asked him, "Will you come to me? But if you do, I'm going to need evidence." So I felt his presence and heard his voice with a German accent, which was compelling for me because normally if I haven't met someone, Their voice sounds like my own thoughts. My stepdaughter Susan, when she comes to me, Wayne Dyer, when he comes to me, it's their voice. But Albert Einstein had this German accent, and I said, tell me things about you I can validate online. And he gave me a lot. And we had a good conversation. Well, later I was sitting in the Laboratory of Consciousness Studies at the University of Arizona with Dr. Schwartz and his wife, Rhonda. And I know that they had been working with Albert Einstein. Several other mediums brought him through as well, including Gary's wife, Rhonda, who is a medium. And I sensed Albert Einstein sitting in a chair right there in the laboratory with us. I couldn't see his form, but the sense was so clear. And I silently said, you're sitting in that chair, aren't you? And I heard him say yes. And I said, tell me something I don't know. And he told me something. And I looked at Rhonda and I said, do you see who's sitting in the chair? Because she does see them. She says, oh, yes, it's Albert. He's been here all along. And I said, well, he just told me where you got that blue sombrero that's hanging on the wall. And I didn't tell her, but he told me they got it at a market in Tombstone, Arizona. And she said, oh, yeah, we picked that up at a market in Tombstone, Arizona. So that's how evidence works. It's self-science. I can't deny that. It's a one-point check, as we call it in the Navy. But to me, it's what helps me trust.
I think Carl Jung also spoke to people who had passed over, and he would communicate with them and ask, opinions and advice and learn from them.
I just love when scientists acknowledge that there may be more. Sorry?
Sorry, we've got a little bit of a time lag going on.
Yeah, I noticed that.
We have a bit of a time lag. Yeah. I had said that Carl Jung has written about doing the same thing and tapping into other people, speaking to them and getting information from them. Yeah.
Yes, there's no doubt that
it's a
Carl Jung. Yeah, there's no doubt that he.
Sorry, you continue.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Carl Jung knew about the collective consciousness and the greater reality, but he couched it in psychological terms. Like I said, it's all science, religion, spirituality, using different languages, but pointing to the same place. And that's what mediumship helps us do. You have a spiritual path, or you have people that talk about the Akashic records. You have people that talk about portals to other dimensions. All of these are simply different lenses through which we view the journey to source.
Is there a particular mind-blowing, paradigm-shifting message that you have personally received? One so big that it was hard to get your head around it?
That would be when I asked, seeking to have connection with a famous person, if I could connect with Jesus. Because I was raised with no religion and my parents actually disdained it. We weren't allowed to talk about it in the house. So my awareness or knowledge of Jesus was just from being an American schoolgirl in a normal public school, but you learn from your friends, and you learn the Christmas story and all of that. So I sat on my couch and I said, Jesus, I would love to have a connection with you. Please, will you enter into my awareness? Whew, Sandie, the presence was so powerful. It just stepped in, overwhelmed me with the love. I couldn't see him, but I could have burst into tears from the love. And I said, I'm sorry to put you to the test, but I need the evidence. And you would know that I don't know the Bible well. So could you give me a relevant Bible verse to validate this visit? And I heard Thessalonians 2:13. Just then, unfortunately, my husband stepped into the living room because I was just doing this on a whim on the couch in the living room. I wasn't in a regular meditation. And it burst me into normal waking consciousness. And I turned to him and I said, Ty, what is Thessalonians? And he looked stunned because he knew I don't know the Bible. And he said, well, that's a chapter in the Bible. And I said, we need to find a Bible. I need to look this up. And we found a study Bible that I bought years before but really didn't get into. And I go, and there's Thessalonians 2:13, something like, and I paraphrase greatly, the man of spirit thinks that the word of spirit is foolishness until he feels the presence of spirit. I looked up on Google how many verses are in the Bible. 33,000. You can put your thumb down, your finger down randomly on the Bible, and you'll come up with things that are not at all relevant to a personal visit from Jesus, but that one was. It was followed the next day by a second visit from him, in which he spontaneously said, Corinthians 2:14. I looked it up. 1 Corinthians 2:14 wasn't relevant. 2 Corinthians was the same message as Thessalonians 2:13. Months later, I felt the presence, and he guided me to a little book by Joel Goldsmith that I had on my bookshelf that I'd read 5 years earlier, and guided me to page forward, page forward, page forward, and suddenly I found both Bible verses, but not annotated, not footnoted, just a quote, back to back on subsequent pages in that book that Jesus had given me. That's when I knew there is a God. But I also know that Jesus, if you read him literally, maybe he says he's the one and only God, but I take him at his teaching, that all of us can do what he did, that all of us are one with the Father because we're manifestations of the one source that is not a man on a cloud. It's this immensely intelligent, divine, creative source that breathes us, that inspires us, that is us. So that was pretty profound.
You wrote a book called The Awakened Way. What is the awakened way?
The awakened way is a way of living consciously connected to Source every moment that you can remember to do so, and divinely guided moment by moment. This is the way I have come to live my life now, and it is divine. It brings so much joy, it brings peace, and helps you find that again when you get off balance. And the teaching, the awakened way itself, is a distillation of Wolf's message. Because Wolf left proof, number one, you're not only human, you are a soul here and now. Number two, you're part of one big web, the two worlds interconnected in wondrous ways that will reveal themselves as you start seeing and looking for the web. And number three, this creative force is love, which is lack of separation. Those three principles that Wolf's death and life showed us are the awakened way. If you can live your life knowing you're not only human and you're part of a web and that love is the guiding force of all that is, it will change your life. So that's what the awakened way breaks down in foundational information and a slew of practical tools and exercises that help you live that way.
Are these the kinds of things that you are teaching in your courses?
In my courses, in my YouTube videos, in everything I do.
So, I mean, this all started with the loss of your stepdaughter. You were married to your husband at that time. How did he cope with what was happening to you?
What's happening to me? Observing with awe, because he knows me. And I would share every bit of evidence, and he couldn't deny it. And he has been on board for the entire ride, and it's a wild one. He married a Navy officer, not a medium. He didn't even know what a medium was when I took him to one to connect with Susan. That's the funny thing. And now here we are. And we go now to these screenings, and he's in the Wolf's Message documentary. He's in Messages of Hope. He's such a good sport. And he cries every time we watch it because it's very emotional. And then he'll get up on stage beyond his comfort zone and share what Susan's passing meant to him and how this journey is changing lives. Fully supportive, yet he is fully grounded in his human side. And he said to me, I'm not where you are, Suzanne, and I never will be. And I realized that is the path our souls agreed to. He keeps me grounded. He reminds me that not everybody is ready to just be all, you know, I don't want to say Pollyanna, to see the world through the lens of love. Yeah. And that helps me stay on mission to help those who are ready to see with the soul.
Was he in the Navy too?
Oh, 26 years, a destroyer captain. He says he'd go back in the Navy any day now if they'd take him.
So when you look back on who you both were at that time, what do you think? What do you feel? You must marvel that, wow, we had no idea.
People read my biography, I just say, wow, that is a big change.
Yeah.
But I'm so much more at peace now. I see myself around this RV, and I dropped something the other day, and I cursed this big sailor word. And I could have just lost it for the rest of the day, but then I just immediately go back to that center that I've learned to tap into, and just, boom, it became a non-incident. That's what I love people to learn. In the Awaken Way book, I talk about the human soul dial. And it's constantly moving back and forth from our very human behaviors that let F-bombs drop when something happens to our soul's nature that just loves everyone at the soul level no matter what. We can't stay over here all the time, and we don't want to stay over here all the time. So we seek the balance, and becoming aware of what's going on inside and making positive choices is part of the Awaken Way, and it's a beautiful path.
So if you could go back and whisper one truth to your old self in uniform, what would it be?
It would be, you are safe and loved. I've just dug up some childhood stuff that I didn't realize was in there. And I've been talking to that little girl and just saying, you're safe, you're safe. I'm going to love you now, that like your parents couldn't. And that carried over into my military career in this constant having to be on guard. Boy, especially as the chairman's aide, you have to be perfect. You don't want him to look bad. And so I was constantly in a state of human fear, not scary fear, but what if I screw up? And that's a very uncomfortable feeling to be in. And so that is gone now. There's just this trust that I'm being guided. There's this state of flow that brings a peace I didn't know back then. And so I didn't feel safe. So I would say to her, you're safe. Just tune in.
Yeah. Yeah. If only we knew. If only we knew. Yeah.
You can get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can. So what is next on the horizon for you? I mean, I know you're really deeply, committed to this movie. What else are you planning?
I have literally the final pages of yet another book with Hay House called Hey Spirit. I'll be finishing that any day now, and that will come out next year. I'm speaking with a gentleman in a few days about worldwide distribution of Wolf's Message. So every medium I've talked to sees this huge blossoming of my work, but I feel like we're already there, and they say, oh no, it's still coming. So I'm just working on flowing and taking it one day at a time.
What do you think about, in the years that you have now been doing this work, we have seen a massive awakening of consciousness. What do you hear? What do you know about this, and where we as a species are heading?
There's no doubt that there's a shift. I can talk about mediumship and people don't run away in fear. Some still do, and they may always be that way, but people are open to concepts about consciousness that they were not in the past. We just need to get scientists not afraid of losing their grants if they accept that the physical world is not primary, that the brain is not primary, that consciousness is. So as scientists begin to embrace that, then more left brain people will admit that we can be guided from a higher place and come from a more loving place. There's a series out now called the Telepathy Tapes on podcast. That's going to change the world. And I'm just thrilled because all of these, not all, guys just said not all, many of these children and adults now with autism are tapping into higher consciousness. Just like Wolf was labeled mentally ill, they're considered handicapped or disabled. Well, that's because they can't operate in what we consider normal, but they are experiencing phenomenal non-physical communication, and they're just demonstrating what mediums have learned how to do.
Yes. And you know, showing us, as you're showing us, that we all have the ability to
We do. And we can open it up in a way that doesn't knock us off balance and allows us to still conduct normal affairs here. So that's a good thing. We do it in a slow manner, no need for psychedelic drugs. Those will bypass your filters big time, but they're not predictable. Meditation may bring some unpredicted experiences, but you can just come right back out immediately and go on your path in a measured way. So I'm a big fan of meditation.
You know, I mean, we know we're living in a world that is going through, you know, the most tumultuous transformation, and it's very unpleasant and uncomfortable for many people, and it makes many people feel anxious. What message would you give to those that are really concerned right now and fearful?
I would first and foremost emphasize this path is not about what some people call spiritual bypassing. I want everybody to feel the pain that we feel when we see other people suffering, because we take action then. We take right action and work to correct injustice, to ease people's grief. And at the same time, knowing we're souls, the message is you can also then access the soul awareness that has the bigger picture and knows that, like I grew from my stepdaughter's death, we grow from our pain. These are opportunities to say there is a better way. But rising above momentarily to access the peace gives us a respite, opens us to insights and guidance that when we come back down into this often painful world, we can now bring that peace with us and make higher choices. So fully feel the pain. There's a purpose in it, but don't wallow in it and get swamped by it. Learn to balance the human and the soul and grow from these challenges. I'd like to use the analogy that there's one weaver weaving this tapestry that we call life. We're right now on the underside of it, and we just see these threads hanging down, and it's chaotic. But if we can rise to the bigger view, see the other side, we see that it's all becoming this beautiful tapestry, and we're all part of it. That's going to change things.
I was going to ask you that if you could, you know, if your soul could write one sentence on a billboard for humanity, what would it be? But it sounds to me like you've just done it. You've just said it.
The one thing is the phrase with which my guides end every daily meditation. By the way, I have a free app on any smartphone. Go look for Awakened Way. We just had our 60,000th download yesterday. I get messages every day in meditation and post them first thing in the morning. That's my sacred process. And the guides end every message with what I would put on a billboard. You are so very loved. One of my dearest friends said when she first heard that, she snorted. That was ridiculous. That's spiritual pablum, because she couldn't accept it inside. And now she embraces it because she's learned to love herself. And when we find that soul in ourselves through living the awakened way, then we start radiating that. We make such a difference in the world, but we receive back from the world that love as well. So if you can't believe that phrase right now, you are so very loved. That's what Spirit wants you to know more than anything.
that they are still here.
And they're still here. Oh, gosh, yes. Still right here.
Yeah, still right here. Suzanne Giesemann, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me back on the show.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you. So for more information about Suzanne Giesemann's works, events, courses and resources, visit her website at suzannegiesemann.com. And you can also learn more about the film Wolf's Message at wolfsmessage.com. Now, before we close, there's something I want you to consider. What if the signs that you're asking for are already showing up, but you're just too busy, too doubtful, or too afraid to believe them? And what if you are already connected, already held, already whole, and your only task is to remember? Think on that. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back with another edition of Between Realms and Reason at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me and a heartfelt thank you to Suzanne Giesemann.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.